Hi! SpellForce Conquest of Eo, owned by Gravity's take on the series, has finally arrived. They switched up the formula from a mix of RPG and RTS to a round-based strategy, 4X style, with various role-playing elements. But how does it stack up? I'll say upfront that this is probably a change that won't be to everyone's taste. After all, it's a departure from what the series was known for, but as someone who always advocated branching into different genres, I can't say I mind. Compared to SpellForce 3, which encouraged fast-paced RTS gameplay, which I personally disliked, this is a welcome change of pace for me. Let's talk about the gameplay and then take a spoiler-free look at the story of Conquest of Eo. I'll preface this by saying that I'm not someone who has a lot of experience with 4X types of games, this being the first I played properly, but despite this, it's surprisingly deep and it never failed to keep me interested. One of my biggest concerns when looking at the previews was that the experience might become somewhat boring and stale, but after having played it myself, I can say that it wasn't the case. The game kept me engaged throughout its various stages, and it became one of those games that grow on you the more you play them. 4X fans probably know how this type of game plays, but here's a quick rundown for SpellForce fans who, like myself, are new to this type of gameplay. You start by picking a type of character, followed by picking a starting location and the game's difficulty. Combined with the fact that a lot of the resources, terrain, opponents and over 700 handwritten adventures are randomly shuffled each time you start a game, it offers a large amount of replayability. One point of criticism I've seen is that, unlike some other 4X games, the map largely stays the same each playthrough. That's true, but it's mainly done because it takes place on an established canon world, so changing the region it takes place in entirely would go against that. In the game itself, you play as a mage, commanding various minions and small-scale armies to achieve your goals. Contrary to the title of the game, you don't actually conquer anything, but instead expand your tower as well as increase your sphere of influence and reputation, all the while encountering a myriad of opponents trying to halt your plans. It has a surprising number of mechanics and complexity in its combat, the majority of which I discovered after watching people better than myself play the game, from using the terrain to flank your opponents or mitigate the damage you take to a shit ton of different recipes and items that you can use to craft consumables or to summon units. Mentioning these things might seem redundant to experienced players, but they gave me a newfound interest in all the things I can discover and all the methods I can use to tackle the battles ahead. Speaking of which, the battles take place on smaller maps where your stacks of units face your opponents. Each stack has 3 action points, which are consumed when moving, attacking, retaliating, using spells, pretty much anything you do, which makes it important to gauge how to best spend them. One example of this would be to use weaker units to swarm one of your enemy's stronger fighters. Yes, he'll still do a lot of damage to those units, but they'll make him use up his action points, sparing you from losing more valuable assets. It just makes for a satisfying experience that can range from a walk in the park to planning out proper strategies depending on the difficulty you choose to play on, which is great because it doesn't force you into these encounters. Heck, for those of you who want to skip them entirely just to focus on the story, you can by auto-resolving them, though keep in mind that this often leads to your units performing a bit worse than they would if you commanded them. This doesn't really pose an issue on easier difficulties. A very important addition if you ask me, since there will definitely be those who want to play to just enjoy the world itself. That brings us to the story. After years of less than lore accurate releases, I'm glad to be able to call Conquest of Eo a proper canon addition to the series. Its story takes place some 400 years before the Convocation, which might not mean much to those who've never played the series, which is why a few of my friends and I have created a fan website compiling all the canon information from the SpellForce universe, from various stories to an interactive world map and unit stats for Conquest of Eo. It contains some spoilers, but it's a one-stop shop for anything you'd want to know without having to play SpellForce 1 and 2, though I would recommend doing so. Besides that, you can watch this video here I made going over the important events in chronological order. As mentioned earlier, you play as a mage who wants to make a name for himself during a time when the usage of magic is heavily monitored by the Circle, an independent group of the most powerful mages on Eo who also act as your antagonists as your skills improve throughout the game. It mainly takes place in a region of Eo called the Highmark and allows us to visit a lot of locations fans will be familiar with from SpellForce 1 and 2, such as Alluvion or Seven Keeps. As we develop our character, so does the story, taking us across a myriad of adventures, recruiting apprentices and so on, all neatly integrated into the canon. I can't really talk more about the story without going into spoilers, but I intend to make a separate video for that. Suffice it to say that the developers at Owned by Gravity put together a surprising package with a clear vision of what it wants to do. It offers both depth and simplicity depending on who is playing it, and, at least from my experience, it offers a variety of options, never forcing you into doing something you don't want. That being said, I haven't tried my luck on the higher difficulties yet, so I can't say if that holds true there. You could criticize it for its lack of language support or the recycling of a few unit models, but considering the rumors of its budget being fairly limited, it's hard to fault it for it, especially for a game that costs €30, around €22 if you get it within the next couple of days of this video being released. Overall, it's a game I can wholeheartedly recommend to both old fans of the series as well as people dipping their toes into it for the first time. It easily offers 30 to 40 hours of single-player gameplay that you can revisit multiple times to experience it from different angles. And that's all I have for you. Let me know what you think in the comments and if it's something you're looking forward to trying. Thanks for watching, bye!